Hi, Sophie.
Hi.
This is just magical. I'm so thrilled to talk to you today.
I can't tell you what it feels like to sit here. I know it sounds to anyone listening that would be like, I'll get over it. But honestly, it feels bizarrely surreal to be sitting here about my book sitting next to you in front of you and you've read it. And that in itself is just...
God, what a book. Bloody hell. I mean, we've been sort of messaging since. And it's surprising that we've never crossed paths before.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Obviously,
strange.
there have been so many chances when we could have. And I think like anyone who follows you, we feel like you know you because you're always so transparent and like authentic. And there you are. I feel like I know you.
I'm looking like shit in the morning.
Well, that's what you sent me. That was the
pajamas.
message you sent me. Do you remember in the first bit of the book? You're like,
yes,
I love that bit where you're because I was talking about how nice it feels to be on camera looking like shit.
Looking like shit.
Yeah,
it's liberating. I DM'd you when I got. It's like within the first few pages of the book.
Yeah.
And you so brilliantly describe that moment of being on camera. You've got dirt on your face, your hair's a mess.
Yeah.
And it felt like a moment where you were just, because obviously you'd done all of these high profile presenting jobs where, you know, the score, you have your hair and makeup done, you're wearing a nice outfit and it feels slightly artificial.
It does.
But there you were in this raw moment and I was like, I know that feeling. Yeah. That feeling of just like, I'm not being the telly me. I'm just being me.
Yeah. And you don't get to, I mean, we all know television is what it is and there's a game to play, there's a role to play. But I felt when so to explain it, when I'd basically just ridden this adapted motorbike all the way from London to Scotland and it was such an achievement. And then I'm sitting there and this camera crew were filming me for part of this series that we're about to start filming. And the camera's on and I'm like, I'm covered in mud. I look like shit. I've got hair everywhere. And I was like, do you know what? This is so liberating. And that was just this feeling of like, that's how I want to be now.
Yeah.
And it almost felt like this moment where not only was the time and the place of actually being where I was at that time, which is I was on the bike where I had the car crash and I had come back to make a documentary that was going to be sort of moving forward from there and looking into the next part of my life. And it all felt very monumental. And then to look like shit at the same time, I was like, this is me. I'm finally me. It's taken a long time to get here, but here I am. Yeah, it's a lovely feeling.
But it's so liberating because I think, yeah, you've been presenting for a long time now and you're an exceptional TV presenter. I know it wasn't part of your plan, but it's almost, I don't know if you feel like you were born to do it, but you certainly are. And you do at times feel you have to adapt to be what other people need you to be in that role. But certainly for this documentary, it was about you. It's about your life to an extent, as well as the greater cause at play. And to feel like, yeah, I can just peel back the layers and go, this is me. I can't do it. I can't be anyone else. This is who I am.
And isn't that the greatest feeling? And I think it comes with age. I know you talk about it where then you feel that sort of moment of going, I'm not going to play these games. I don't want to do the things that make me feel uncomfortable anymore. I don't want to say the things that I don't believe in. I don't want to be the person I'm not. And it takes a while to get there. And I have to say, I think I'm only able to really genuinely feel I am there because I've just written this book. Because I said, right, I didn't intend to write a book. I'd always thought in my mind one day it'd be a wonderful thing to do. Then lockdown happened. This opportunity came around to write this story and I wrote my story. And in writing it, I realised I'd actually got to a point where, shit, I made it. I think I'm here. I think I've figured those things out to know who I am now and be authentic. And we say these things a lot. You hear it thrown around a lot, you know, how to be true to yourself. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and I think a lot of courage to do that. And certainly I think as a wheelchair user, as a woman, as a presenter, well, all these other labels that I carry, it's taken a long time to work out which one I actually am. And yeah, I think now the presenting has become, as you say, it's part of who I am and maybe something I was meant to do. And I enjoy it so much. But I enjoy so much more presenting as myself, not just as the presenter, you know? And that's a hard thing to get. That's glass ceiling stuff, trying to get to that space and be yourself on screen. And when there's opportunities come around, you've got to grab them. They don't come around all that often, but I think I'm getting closer and closer to having more of them happen.
So going back to that moment where you'd done this huge motorcycle ride and you'd arrived at this exact spot that you could see the mark on the road from where you'd had your crash at the age of 18. With cameras around you, were you able to process the hugeness of that moment and the pain, or was it just all too surreal to do so?
Do you know, I've been back to the place where I crashed maybe 3 or 4 times now in my life. And as you say, there's this marker on the road and it's very, very weird to see because it's this almost like a portal into the past. It's like there's a big, basically where I crashed, there's a black skid in the road that's still there 18 years later, right? So this thing that happened that I can barely piece together because it was so traumatic and so the crash was so bad, I don't remember a lot of it, but there's this marker, like an actual proof that this thing happened. You know what I mean? It's really surreal. And sitting by it, you know, at any time now, even 18 years down the line or however long it's been since my injury, I can't quite take in the enormity of it all. How there is this point, we all have sliding doors in our lives and we all, you know, can look back and go, oh, if I had not gone on that train or if I had not met that man or if I had not, you know, had that conversation or taken that flight, my life would have gone a different direction. I'm sure we can all relate to that. But for me, that's this, like when I sit in this spot, especially with cameras around me, I can't get my head around how there could have been a completely different life lived. And I don't often think about what that life was. Like if I hadn't been paralysed, if I hadn't driven the car the way I did, if I hadn't taken that road, if I'd taken another one, you know, all those things, they all come rushing up. And then there's the camera going, how do you feel? How do you feel? I'm like, I don't know. But, you know, I think you just got to do, it's almost like any big milestone in your life. It takes a while to go, right, stop, ground yourself. How do you feel? And it takes, I don't know, I think it's a hard thing to do to really identify what it is it all feels, because there's a lot of loss in there. There's a lot of gratitude in there. There's a lot of like, you know, potential what ifs and who could I have been sort of thing, but also like a real gratitude. I'm still here. I didn't die. I could have died in that spot. So yeah, it was huge. But you know, I also just have to stop and think, shit, you did it. I was paralysed. At a time when I was paralysed, I didn't know what I could do. Like no one had told me what was possible for a young woman with a high level paralysis, and I had no idea. I didn't think disabled people could do all that much, and that was my naivety, my ignorance. I'd never really met many disabled people, and so, you know, when I write this in my book, actually, when I met myself, I was the first disabled person I'd ever met. So I had a lot of ableism that I carried with me. It's taken me a long time to unpack it. So even just the action of riding a motorbike to the place where I crashed the car with a camera crew that I have brought with me feels like, wow, look what you've done. Wow, you've created this thing that, you know, you had no idea was possible. And that's exciting as well. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we were chatting just before we came into the studio. We were chatting about, you know, doing this, putting a lot of your life story, you can never put the whole thing there, but a lot of your life story in ink onto a page, and just how bizarre that is. Yeah. And the fact that we've never met, although I feel like I know you and you feel like you know me, but I've read through your life and I've, you know, lapped up every word of these beautiful and painful stories, and then here we are, and I know all of this stuff, and that's about to happen with thousands of strangers that you might not ever meet. You know, how are you dealing with that? Because that's big.
So I think the way that I am getting sleep at the moment and not feeling terrified is there's two things going on for me. So when I had my injury, I didn't really have I didn't have very many people around to use as role models. I didn't really know much about, like I just said, what was possible for people like me. So part of me wanted to write my book and write my story just to give somebody who might be going through a similar situation an idea that don't be limited by your own or other people's beliefs of what you and your body can and can't do. Because of course you are now going to be living, if you have a physical disability, within the limitations of what your body can and can't do. But if you can expand your mind and you can find, you know, systems around you to support you, sky's the limit, really it is. And I don't mean that flippantly. I also don't mean to dispel at people that literally have had choices taken away from them, because that's a very real thing. But if you can create an attitude and an environment around you that enables you, you'd be surprised how far you can go. It's a very privileged position to be in, but it's true. And I think that was one reason why I wanted to write the story down, just to sort of say, look, this is an example of a way in which you can disbelieve some of the myths around, you know, disability and all those things. So there's that. I also took a long and hard look in the mirror and I thought, right, who are the people that I admire the most in the world? Who are the role models? Who are the artists, the musicians, the painters, the thinkers that I adore? What do? They tell the truth. They do. They put their heart and soul out there. And they talk about, like, you look, Tracy Emin, who talks about her body being ravaged all the way through her art, but more recently, you know, with her cancer, for example, or you look at, you know, Freida Kahlo, I have just literally, well, she's my hero. And you look at what she did. She puts her reality on paper. And I thought, on canvas. I thought, that's what I have to do. I have to do that for myself. If I write a story that isn't genuine, what have I done? I've wasted my own time and other people's time. And so holding those two thoughts in my head, I'm just going forward with this and hoping that, yes, it is a very raw and very unflinching and very candid account of what it's like to wake up with paralysis and live with it in a way that I don't feel has ever really been looked at before. Certainly, I've not read a story like it before. There's that. But I also feel, why not? We've got to unpack some of the truths. I think it's such a wonderful thing to do, to go into the nuances of disability and start to understand the different lived experiences that we all have. Often you get grouped, you know, wheelchair user or somebody with a sensory impairment, you know, you kind of get lumped together, or even wider, the whole group of disability gets grouped together. But there's so much within that needs to be explored, and spinal injury carries its own complications, and it's very impactful to the people that have it and the family members of those who acquire it. So I wanted to also really go into those two, the relationships I've had to go through with my family and how that's impacted them too. All of this wanted to feed in, you know? So there's a lot to it, I think.
And you did it so eloquently. I mean, I feel like I know your mum and your dad and your brother, and I haven't met any of them, but I've got such a sense of their personalities and their own coping mechanisms, which you described so beautifully. And there was one line that really impacted me deeply when you were exploring that, the processing you were having to do, especially early on in your rehabilitation, looking at young Sophie and looking at the Sophie that's in front of me today. And you say, I mean, I, as you can see with the actual book, have dog-eared about 1,000 pages, and I've written loads of quotes, which I'm going to, you know, chuck back your way. But you say, who you were as a person in the before makes all the difference to who you become in the after, which I don't think I'd ever really spent much time looking at that sort of sentiment and understanding it.
Okay.
And of course it makes so much sense, and perhaps it's very bespoke with, you know, the person, but also the shape and texture of trauma that someone's been through. But I think it applies to any trauma. Yeah. You can look at, okay, well, how was I before, and how has that informed how I've dealt with things and who I am today? So looking back at young Sophie, you describe her again just so articulately, and you describe her as wild. When you look back at her now, how do you feel?
It was one of the hardest things I think I did in the book, was actually go, right, let's spend some time with her. And I do refer to myself in the third person all the time, because for reasons as I explain is, and actually what we were talking about just before we came in here, because I know you've written about it in your book, is when you look at your younger self, you can somehow feel sometimes a little bit disappointed with her, or perhaps, you know, a little bit embarrassed about her, or let down by her, or in a way, you know, a bit scathing or even just mean. And I think for a long time, because I crashed my car when I was 18 years old, I was at that point where we're probably all at our most, well, wild is one word, but we're all working things out. We're on that precipice of life. We're about to fall off into, you know, wake up into the real world. But we're a bit blindfolded, you know, like the fool in the tarot card. You're sort of like, la la, looking around. Where am I? Everything's groovy. Here we go. Hello, world. And then, boom, life happens. And I look at her and I feel a bit disparaging. I'm like, oh, you fool. You had no idea what was about to happen to you. And I was like that for a long time. I was a bit like, I'm going to move on. I've become a better version of myself. I'm a better version than her. But I also was slightly jealous of her and slightly sort of, gosh, you know, it'd be so wonderful to have some of those traits of hers that I no longer have, that sort of the tallness of her, or the physical strength of her, or just the femininity of her, you know, being able to strut somewhere, or whatever those things are that the non-disabled version of me can do. So there was a bit of a chasm there, a bit of a friction, but I just moved on. But in the book, I decided, right, I need to spend some time with her, work out what it was about her that made me into who I am. And I really did reconcile those differences. And then towards the end of the book, I found myself actually it was almost an exercise, like a therapy. I sat very, very quickly, the rest of the book I agonised over. I wrote very, several times. I'm not a very natural writer, and I was writing and rewriting. But this one chapter, I sat and like a stream of consciousness just wrote, what would I do if I was her for a day? And I sat and I wrote, I was like, I'd go skiing with my dad, or I'd run around with my mum, or, you know, I would dance with my friends or something. And it just came out. And I have to say, humbly, very simple things. I wasn't like, I'm going to climb Everest. It was literally, I would walk down the street with my mum. I'd, you know, rave with my friends or something. And I found myself at the very end of it just going, do you know what? I don't want to be her anymore. And I don't dislike her anymore. She would probably be quite proud of who I am. And if you were sat with little Fearne, if they were here, our little usses, I think they'd be like, big up.
But it takes time, doesn't it? It takes time, and it takes a lot of self-inventory.
Yeah.
And I think most people, you know, maybe whether there's been trauma at play or not, will look back and feel, just, you know, I've had certainly periods where I've thought, I can't even look at young Fearne. I will do everything I can to not be like her. But you're so right. We have to honour those younger versions of ourselves. So what was the conclusion? What bits of young Sophie have made you who you are today?
I think the stubbornness and the belligerence, the sort of don't tell me what to do type of kid. I was a pain, and I pushed back, but I think that's helped me so much. So when I first came out of hospital as a wheelchair user, and I got slightly to terms with, you know, right, paralysis is going to mean ABC, but whoa, going out in the world as a wheelchair user, holy shit, this is going to be a whole another thing. I mean, where do you even start? The way people talk to you, the way you can't get around, you know, like all of it was a bombardment. And so I realised quite early on, I'm going to need every little bit of pluck, every bit of tenacity and like a bit of fuck you-ness that I've got in me that was always there, but also a bit misguided. I had nothing to fight back against before my injury, and now I've got a lot to fight against. Let's channel that. And so I think some of those better traits, but I also think there was a lot of shedding of you know, sort of the rough edges and all of the bits of me, the creative energies or the competitive energies that were kind of probably a little bit problematic at times, suddenly got really, really heightened. And I felt, actually, this is great that I brought those things in. I mean, the creative side in particular, because I was always into my art and always loved it. You know, when you're at school, you never really, if you're into those things, not necessarily always encouraged. And I came out and went, whoa, I'm just going to do my art. And it gave me this armoury, I feel, to just attack the world in a way that an artist would. I used all my imagination and my creativity in a way that I'd never done before. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, often, and I want to talk about art in a minute, because often the most beautiful art that really hits you in the heart comes from a place of pain. You know, like our beloved Freida, who...
Love it.
I love Freida so much. I based my GCSE arts final piece on Freida's Henry Ford hospital.
Oh my God, on the bed.
scene. Yeah, but I made it like, it was obviously like there was no trauma at this point in my life, and it was just sort of like me and body image and boys, and it's like I can't even look at it. I don't want to see that painting ever again. I was imagining, and it was life size. It was awful. Anyway, love Freida. We need to all wear flowers on our hair and have a monobrow and whatnot.
Yeah,
she's amazing. I want to talk about that in a minute, but going back to this, looking at your old self, because I think this is going to be deeply compelling for so many people, especially if there has been a marker of pain in one's life. And making peace, which you've just described, you're at this place of acceptance, but also a place of gratitude as to who you are now. There was a moment in the book where you were looking at that wild quality that you could see in yourself, and it was when you were quite early on in your rehabilitation, and there was a very poignant line where you sort of, I guess you were asking yourself, you know, how can I be wild and trapped, which is how you felt at the time. How do you feel about that now?
I still don't quite know, because it's so I guess this all comes down to identity. And when you're young and you're working out what your identity is and who you are, I was very wrapped up in that idea of like I was this sort of wild, free-spirited, uncontrollable, slightly untamed young girl. And then I was paralysed and a wheelchair user. And these traits don't mix. There is no way they can cross over. And I found myself thinking, how can I be both things? So over the years, I still feel there's a dissonance there that isn't quite. I still feel a murmuring in me sometimes when I see certain things happening, and that I can't quite express myself, and that I describe myself sometimes as like there's a little animal inside that's sort of in a cage, rattling to kind of get out. And that's not just about paralysis, I think. Well, maybe it is just about paralysis, but I think people can identify with that there's an inner you that's kind of an inner child, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like that inner you wanting to like have that freedom.
Yeah.
And it's not possible. And for me, I have a very literal version of why that can't happen, because I can't walk and I can't move. So that gets very contained. But perhaps it's very relatable to anyone that you kind of feel you can't quite be the person that you want to be. You're inhibited in some way. So I think over the years, and back to the point we were making earlier about this sort of becoming more comfortable with who I am, I've found ways to express that wildness. So I can still be paralysed and free. I can still be those, there is perhaps what's the word I'm looking for? Like, a paradox there. And I can embody that. And that's the beautiful thing about life. And that's what I love about being disabled in a way, is that there's always a space to redefine what disability means. And for me, the search to feel free and to feel wild and to feel like I'm connected to the person I was and to the wider world, even the natural world, actually, I found ways to do it, whether that be as simple as finding a wheelchair that can enable me to get out into nature, or I've found people that can carry me into spaces where I can feel myself, or whatever it is I need. So I think it's just about finding those coping mechanisms, right?
I don't know if it was you consciously landed on that or not, but early on in your rehabilitation, you were seeking out ways to allow yourself to have that freedom. And I'm imagining one of the first points was seeing a swimming pool in the rehabilitation centre and just going for it. There was one day where you went, I'm going in, and you did it.
Yeah. This sounds so... This can sound really like I plucked it out of a motivational book, and I really want to say this and it sound genuine. I had this idea that I was paralysed and I was frightened of a lot of stuff. I was frightened of my body. I was frightened of other people's perceptions of me. I was frightened of the wheelchair. I was frightened of falling out of it. I had a lot of fear. A lot, more than I'd ever experienced in my life. And I didn't like that at all. I didn't know what to do with all the fear. It was everywhere. And I could feel myself like grasping for ways to get rid of it that weren't me, like holding on to other people, I mean, literally and metaphorically holding on to other people to keep me safe. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And I realised that, look, if you're going to let yourself feel fear, you're going to be more paralysed than you already are now. Does that make sense? Okay, so fear is, people say, I've actually wrote about this in the book as well, which is when people say I was paralysed with fear, that's a real thing. And I was like, if I'm gonna paralyse myself and my body's gonna be paralysed, I'm doubly fucked. So no. So when I started seeing ways in which I could get in the water, or I could get on a motorbike, or I could go places that I didn't imagine myself or see myself, scary places, like places with other people that were looking down on me or whatever, I could feel the fear like a physical weight sitting on my chest. And then I thought, well, it's only you that's stopping you. If you let this, you are literally making your life even harder, and you've got enough of that already. So get rid. So that's when, the swimming pool, I saw it and I'm like, you have to get in there. You can. But I was scared. It's like, just do it. And then I started realising there was this liberated feeling of, all right, you're frightened, but that's okay. Just move towards it. And I know that a lot of people find that strange, the compulsion towards fear, where some people they go away from fear. I realised then that's what I would have to do to survive or thrive, is go towards the fear. Because otherwise, I would be more disabled.
Which leads me nicely on to another quote that I have written down, Sophie, because it is just full of quotes that have just impacted me in a huge way. And this was after, again, early on in your rehabilitation, and also like against the wishes of the team of doctors around you. You went to Canada to go snowmobiling.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Snowmobiling. Snowmobiling.
Snowmobiling.
Yeah, snowmobiling.
It sounded wrong when I said it. Snowmobiling. Snowmobiling. You're on a snowmobile.
Yes.
And it was obviously this hugely exhilarating moment, and you're with your dad and you're whizzing across the ice at an insane speed. And the line that I wrote down is, I felt like I was on the other side of fear and there was no going back. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This is like a little equation. Like, if you always push past that thing, Can you go back? Can you go back to being scared?
I don't think so. I don't think so. In my experience, no. You can always feel the nervousness, but you've been there now. It's almost like, I don't know, if you've ever been hurt and I don't know if you feel like you can be hurt in the same way again once you've got past it. It's like you build up. It's almost like if you visualise it, it's like you get to a point of no return. That I just, on the tipping point of fear, it's almost like a mountain. You've got over the top of it. And so you can't go back now. It's almost like you're on the other side. And I just felt that feeling of like, wow, I'm on the other side. Here we go. It's like you've broken through. And yes, I'd just been on this snowmobile and we'd gone across the frozen lake at 60 miles an hour, and I was absolutely terrified. And then I got to the other side and I was like, I'm alive. Holy, this is what it feels like to feel alive. Oh my God. And that was the moment where I was like, I can't go back to, there's no way. So yeah, I think maybe you can't go back. Or if you do go back and you're facing a similar fear, you know how to get through it. You know you can because you've done that.
Yeah.
You like laid a path for yourself.
Like I was saying, I feel like I've got this sort of idea of who your parents are. I've built up these wonderful characters. And there was this great moment where your dad, who was dealing with, like you say, how it's impacted all the people in your life, he wanted to throw this party that you were massively on board with. And this, again, was quite early on in your rehabilitation. You had all these people that you loved there. And you had this party and you let your hair down and you were laughing with your friends and there's music playing, wine flowing. And you had this wonderful time. And you said to choose to be celebrating instead of commiserating at such a dark time in your life helps to shine a light into the areas of yourself that you might have forgotten. And that, that's counterintuitive a lot of the time to celebrate when things feel heavy. But you've realised that by sort of forcing yourself into that space, there was this illumination of bits of you that you'd let fall away. So what bits were sort of recovered in that moment, do you think? In the partying. So yeah, I don't know where the idea even came from. It was when I was rewriting it, I was like, where did this brilliant idea come from? To have a massive party, like all of the friends that we knew and loved, to celebrate coming home from hospital when I'd just been paralysed. And I think to answer your question, I think it shone a light into, I'm still here. Yes, parts of me died and parts of me will never be recovered. And now I do feel like a different person. But there is that girl that, all the things that I valued, I still value. So that hasn't gone away. In fact, they've got heightened. So my value, my love for my friends or my love for my family or my love for a party or my love for music or being in that environment of just fun and letting your hair down and letting go. I loved those things before. That was part of who I was. And then I was like, hold on, I'm sitting on a dance floor. Okay, maybe I'm in a wheelchair. Okay, maybe this is a little bit different. But I'm still getting the same kick. This is amazing. And that was so important. It just set the scene. And I think, I will be forever grateful for the ways in which my amazing parents supported me throughout my recovery in such different ways. And they are wonderful. I owe them my life. But that moment of having a party after the injury is just brilliant. I think, I know people, if I said to them, you should have a party. If you've just been paralysed, have a party. They'd be like, fuck off. Yeah. But it was for us. And also it really helped cement our family, put us back together. Because that's what we used to do before. That's what my parents always did. They were always party people. And so for us to do it again, it was almost a bit like going, okay, it's all right. We're all back together now. Yeah. Soph didn't die. We all got through this. No, we're all in one piece. Let's do what we do best, sort of thing. Yeah. And this was by no means sort of linear recovery involving your parents as well, because the bit of your story I didn't know at all until I read the book was when you'd had this out of the blue situation where you'd had a splinter in your bum and it got infected and you had an open wound, and that led to, at the time, an unknown bed rest on your front, and it ended up being 3 years. Yeah. I found it beautifully painful to read because I was so grateful that you were willing to share a bloody awful moment where you'd gained an element of freedom and, going out back into the world and being with your friends. And the next thing, you're in your parents' house, you're lying on your front for 3 years. it's unimaginable. And how you got through that, you know, you had your brilliant parents there and your brother and some friends that were visiting very regularly. But I don't want to simplify that time of pain, but it certainly seems towards the end of it that art did save you.
Completely. It did. And I'm really grateful you pulled this up, because I think there's something really unhealthy about the idea that once you've acquired the disability, there's a sort of moment. It's a bit like when you've suffered a loss of any kind, a bereavement, anything. It's like, oh, you've come to terms with it now. It's done. It's closure. You know, you're now moving on into the world. And with disability, in my situation, that it hasn't gone away. It never goes away. So there wasn't a linear sort of like recovery, and it got better and better and better and easier and easier and easier. In fact, the secondary complications that have come around have been almost more impossible to manage than the original injury. So yeah, so after when I was going through this period of prolonged bed rest, which for anyone who wouldn't understand the reasons for that, basically, if you're sitting down all the time, if you get a wound anywhere in an area that you're sitting, it's not going to heal because you're sitting on it. And it will heal eventually, but it takes a long time. And I had got this splinter, which I didn't know was there. And then I got this wound, and then it turned into an abscess, and then it had to be removed. And basically I was left with this big hole, like an ice cream scoop had been taken out of the right cheek of my bum. And I couldn't sit because that wound wouldn't fix. So I had to lie on my stomach for what was meant to be a year. Then it was 6 months, sorry. Then it was meant to be a year. Then it turned into 2. And then eventually it ended up as 3 years. And it was just torturous on every level. And yeah, as you say, art, literally, it was free. Honestly, Freida came down from this Freida. And I call her the patron saint of the disabled. I don't know if I should do that or not, but she felt like a saint. She this postcard arrived. It was a picture of Freida Kahlo sitting in a wheelchair painting. And at this point, I'd been lying on my stomach, and I was really struggling to paint or make art. Really, I was struggling with everything, with motivation. It was very uncomfortable. You couldn't do a lot in that position. And I'd really lost my way, and I really didn't have the tools to cope, and Mum couldn't deal with it either. And it was too much. And then this door opened into painting again, and I just dived into painting and just found a way to like position this canvas under my bed, and I would paint for a bit and then my arms would go dead and I'd have to roll around and try and get the pins and needles out of my hand. Then I'd paint a bit more. And it was just the most amazing experience because it gave me this map back to me. And I will be forever grateful for the power of art. I think it is the greatest tool that we have. And, you know, just being able to get out what's in your mind onto paper or escape in that way that's incredibly liberating in ways like people talk about this often, and I've lived it. If you are trapped, your imagination is your only freedom. And I couldn't go anywhere physically. I literally couldn't leave the bedroom. And I mean, I could if I was carried around, but I really couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't even sit in the chair. So my mind just went all over the place, and I found a way out. So it was just wonderful. Thinking about it now, it was just amazing. So I was painting all these Freida paintings, copying myself as Freida, then painting myself in the water and painting like it just went on and on and on. It was amazing.
I have to add for everybody listening to this, it's not like you were doing little stick men. You're a bloody brilliant painter. Like, because people were going, "Oh, that's cute. You're doing some painting." No, you're fucking amazing. And you know, even in the book, you've done these line drawings, and line drawings are the hardest thing to do because unless you're a seriously accomplished artist, line drawings just look like a kid's done it. But your line drawings, they're exceptional and they're emotive because they're simple. I mean, you're a brilliant artist, and I'd love to see those pictures that you're talking about. I'm sure they were. And, you know, it is such a healing thing, whether it's poetry or having, because there are no rules with art, are there? And it's how you're feeling and how you're choosing to express and make sense of everything. Yeah. And going back to our beloved Freida, you know, she did that so exceptionally. Yeah. And you can see, like, any of her paintings, you go, bloody hell, I think she's having a bit of a shit time there. Like, you can see it. You know.
It's visceral, isn't it? You're like,
is.
Oh, poor Freida. Shit.
Yeah.
Totally. And I have to say, as someone who, I don't know, when I had my injury and in the time since where I've struggled with my mental health, I was never very comfortable with not being okay. My mum's very stoic, very resilient, and it's all this sort of like, we're fine. I've always been like, we're fine. And it's not surprising I ended up finding art as this, it was a tool for me. And I don't know how people live without it. Like, I just don't know how you deal with all the stuff that's going on if you don't have a way to get it out. I just don't. And I mean, I found myself when I was in hospital, and I still do it now. I do these like line drawings, which are in the book, which I do freehand little line drawings of things that are in my mind, whether it's me running or skipping or whatever, or jumping, or it's even just me in my chair with my friends or whatever it is. I do these little drawings. But I also was doing closing my eyes, putting my pen on a paper and drawing from my imagination. And they are mad. I mean, they come out a bit wild sometimes. There's an arm there and a leg there and it doesn't look very proportionate. But sometimes they come out and they are like hauntingly.
They're the feeling.
They are exactly that. And that's the best coping mechanism I've got, I think, for dealing with all of this.
You've got to do an exhibition or something.
Oh, I'd love to.
Do it.
Oh, I don't know.
No, you do know.
I do know, yeah.
Do it.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. Seriously, you have to, because and you'd have such a diverse range of work as well. And there'd be storytelling in it. Oh, please.
Okay.
I'm going to like bug
you've
you.
thrown it out there now.
No, you have to. And I'm going to like be DMing you and going, have you done it? You've got to do it. Honestly, I'll be first in the queue to come and sit.
Oh, shit, yes.
It would be amazing. So, there's so many bits of your story I haven't covered as yet, but I know there were so many moments throughout the book where you could see you having to process the discrimination that you were facing in all different areas. College seemed like a particularly tricky period of life because you had, it was like outright discrimination where people were actually rude to you and pointing at you. And I guess in the earlier days of your rehabilitation, you didn't have the voice or know what to say back. Whereas now, in your career and life, it's your mission to have that voice for yourself and others.
I think it's perhaps not. It's how do I explain this? I think when people say, the concept of like, does she take sugar, or the idea that people talk to, you've heard that expression. They talk to the person that's with you, things like that. Okay. That you can call them microaggressions, you can call them outright discrimination. There's a scale of experience and the impact that people have on you for just day-to-day life, whether it be, like you said, students kind of pointing at me and laughing at me, or it be literally you physically can't get into a building because there's no access. Yeah. These are all on a scale of shit. And I have, to start with, I have no idea how to deal with it. I was like, what? I'm just going to fight back. That got exhausting. It's like I can't fight every battle. And then as I fell into television and fell into creating a profile, which I'm still trying to build, I realised the more the more I could fight back, and from a space where people would listen, because we should all know the fact is it's very difficult. Life as a wheelchair user, life as a disabled person, it's really challenging. And there's things that can be done to say that. There are so many solutions out there. And I've encountered so many problems. I was like, right, where do we find the solutions? And my little artist brain in me was going, oh, there's ways here, ways there, ways there. And then I found television and I was like, that's the tool to help. And I feel it does help. I think it's done a huge amount to normalise and, represent disabled people. And I think the UK is leagues ahead from many other countries in the world that don't really put disability into the mainstream. But we've still got a way to go. But yeah, it is definitely like, it's exciting when I've been able to figure out what I want to say and then find a way to say it, and then got this space to say it. That's where I feel like, oh, purpose, meaning, I've figured it out. This is why this has all happened to me. And it's a wonderful space to sit on a selfish note, but also on that kind of greater scale of like, maybe we can shift the dial here. We can redefine what disability means. We can talk about the problems. And I love doing that now. That's my thing, You're
bloody good at it. I mean, as you've just said, it's not just the microaggressions and the things you have to deal with on an emotional level. It's a very practical, systemic problem as well. Yeah. And, even today, finding the studio we're in today, which has wheelchair access, is not something I've thought about before, which is not okay. No, but I hadn't. And I was sort of shocked and surprised at how few studios had wheelchair access and were wheelchair friendly. And I found that incredibly sad. And we all kind of know the government aren't going to do anything about this, because this isn't just like studios, this is shops and leisure centres and wherever else you need to go to get into, to be with other people, to buy things, to eat, etc. It's not a given that they're going to be wheelchair friendly when we're looking specifically at wheelchair users.
Yeah.
The government aren't going to do anything. So is it down to the individual businesses and industries?
Do you know, it's one of those questions, sort of chicken and egg, isn't it, really? I mean, my agenda, the place I come from with this, and I suppose so many other sort of charities that represent disabled people and, you know, bodies that represent disabled people in the UK would say it's a combination. It needs to be everybody involved. Of course, from the top down, it would help if we could have a bit greater empathy and a wider understanding of how to support people to be able to live and thrive with their disabilities, not sort of just constantly trying to get it's so nuanced, and I can't answer this question very quickly. This is a whole other podcast, you know what I mean? It's so complicated. But I do feel where we can, it's on us as in our community to speak about what we need in a way that which does get tiring. Absolutely it does. And I think they call it activist burnout or whatever is a real thing.
Yep.
And I've seen it in my community, especially with COVID, people physically and emotionally unable to keep going with this fight because it's just, I've got too much to do. This is too much. I've got to look after my own needs and try and tell you to look after it's exhausting, but we have to do it. And so the problem is striking that balance between, if you are somebody who is speaking out about the problems that you're encountering all the time in your day-to-day life, whether it's finding an accessible studio, whether it's somebody being rude to you, whether it's, you know, you're not getting your benefits that you need, or whatever it is, the support that you need, you don't want to always be fighting and always be that person that, oh, there's the disabled people kind of getting pissed off again, which is that stereotype of that sort of, because there is disabled joy, there's all this, and it's such a beautiful thing to see. And that's one of my favourite things in the world, is tuning into Instagram and seeing disabled people all around the world living their best lives. It's like, I just get such a kick out of it. And so it's like, right, I want to show you both. And I want to show you how it looks to be both. And often I found when people, this is another thing, and I know I'm jumping a little bit off track here, but when I talk about my joy of life, or my gratitude for life, or my love of my life, I almost feel like I can't tell you how bad the things are as well, because then you won't believe me. It's like if I say, you know, I'm paralysed, I can't walk, and I can't go here and I can't go there. There's that pity thing. There's that kind of implicit like, oh, it's shit to be disabled. And then I tell you, but hold on a minute, I live the best life. I love it. I love every inch of it, and I wouldn't change it. Then there's that, hey, what? Hey, hold on a minute. So there's this constant contradiction. And so to the point about shifting perceptions and so therefore making the society a more, an easier place to survive and live as a disabled person. I think we need to change perceptions there too.
Yeah.
That this is, that kind of, it's small things, small adjustments, attitudinally and physically, that can enable disabled people to integrate more effectively and easily and naturally. And then obviously government needs to do the right thing by, it's all of that. You see where I'm going around in circles, it's a difficult thing, but it's not impossible. And even in my lifetime, I've been paralysed 18 years and I've seen the way things are changing. I don't think a young girl being paralysed at 18 now would have to deal with some of the things that I had to deal with, because we live in a better world now. Still a long way to go. Yeah, the fight continues.
But also, you, and I'm sure you're not going to be quick to sort of big yourself up here, but you've been a huge part of that change, not only here, but also the last part of the book is harrowing, talking about your trip to Ghana. And, whether you call it the worst place to be disabled, I know that you've talked about this in the book, do you call it the worst place in the world to be disabled or not? But it's certainly a very harsh environment to be disabled because of the lack of education around disability. But because of the attention that you drew with the documentary you made, the UN then started investigating these prayer camps where people from the disability community are sent and they're treated so badly. You helped change something
that was mad
globally, which that is huge, powerful shit.
It feels like powerful shit. So
it is powerful shit.
It does feel like powerful shit. I mean, that was a bit of a moment where I thought, shit. Like, I could do some stuff here, we can change. But then for clarity's sake, the BBC had made a strand of documentaries called The World's Worst Place. There was The World's Worst Place to be a woman, with I think Stacey Dooley. There was The World's Worst Place to be gay, I think. And I don't know how they landed on those particular countries they went to in those documentaries, but Human Rights Watch had done this terrible report about what was happening in Ghana at the time to disabled people. And so that was the question, right? Is this the world's place to be disabled? So we went to go and have a look. And it was a wake-up call for me. And I can't, I mean, wow, the stuff that we saw was really really shocking. And the documentary was very impactful, and thankfully it helped Human Rights Watch to do their work and to draw attention to what was happening, which is some chaining and some really abusive practices towards people with different types of disabilities. And then eventually there was change made. The government eventually they banned the practice of shackling, and then there was the camps were investigated and things like that. So, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think that documentary would be made now with a white middle class British presenter presenting it. I think we've moved now, and that story should have been told from a Ghanaian perspective, from a person with a disability from Ghana. Those are things that I would say I think I feel uncomfortable a little bit about, and I'm just putting that out there now. But I also thought it was this amazing experience of going, wow, it is actually possible to change things. It is. It might feel like you can't change stuff. It's so huge, but we can. Like collectively, we can. Yeah. Individually, we can. Yeah. And that was like light bulb moment. That's when I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is it. I want to do. What can I do? What can I do? And then I threw myself in all these different directions. There's so many people that need helping. Where do we go? What do we do? You know, and that's been really fun working that out and moving that forward. And I hope that continues, you know.
I mean, you talk about, obviously, you've got the beautiful, prestigious job of hosting the Paralympics, and reading that section was just pure joy. But you talk about this, it was a double-edged sword. You had this huge influx of celebration around the disability community, and just so much noise was made, and you saw practical change in London around that time with accessibility. Yeah. But then when it wasn't on the TV, that dwindled, and that's what we need to stop happening.
It is a hard thing because the Paralympics there was a movement that was created, and every time it comes around, I feel the community kind of harness it and go, right, let's use it, galvanise everyone, let's talk about disability more, let's mainstream it, let's talk about it. And it gets really exciting, and especially when the 2012 games came around into the UK, and then there was this amazing movement, a moment where the Superhuman campaign came out, and I remember sitting and looking at that, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, somebody's just said disabled people can be superhuman. And I, at this point, I've been paralysed for about 10 years. I have been treated that way, and I couldn't get over it. And I thought, right, we're here. This is it. This is the change. But the game stopped and it went quiet, and disability sort of disappeared again. And then 4 years later, it comes back again for the next round of games. And there's this hope every time. Let's make this moment the moment we stop forgetting about disabled people. When there's conversations around inclusion, disabled people don't get brought in, and can this change? And so for the activist in me or the advocate in me always gets hopeful, but I feel that there is now, I think that's happening, but it's just not happening quick enough. It's just happening quick enough. You know, and people think that because there's certain laws in certain countries that are there to protect our rights, that we've got equality, but we don't. Nope. And you know, and I'm saying this from probably one of the most privileged positions you can possibly be in. I mean, I'm one of the I think the 10% of people in the world who need to have an assistive device to mobilise. There's something like 90 million on average, or something. I can't remember the actual figures. Only 10% of people have access to this assistive tech they need. 10%. The fact that I'm sitting in a wheelchair is a privilege. And this is the reality. And it's sort of like, we've got such a long way to go. So I do think the Paralympics is wonderful as a vehicle for change, but there needs to be more.
It can't be every 4 years.
It can't be every 4 years.
It's the only time that we're not only talking about it, but celebrating it.
Yeah.
Like talking about looking on Instagram and seeing disabled joy. And also, I think it's, you know, as you just said, the disability community, you're always going to galvanise and come together to push things forward that need to be changed. But the other end of it needs to be people have to listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listening is the most important thing here. And then acting on it. You can't just sit there and listen. But I don't know many people that would truly listen and then not want to be part of systemic change. And as you said, it's huge. It's a complex, intricate problem that's been around for thousands of years. And it's about perception, and it's about the practicalities of everyday life. But without sounding whimsical, I really feel optimistic when I hear you talk about it, that there is a huge possibility for change.
I think so, Fearne. I do. I mean, maybe that's the optimist in me. I do feel there is that always there's so many people out there doing the work to be heard and also to listen. But so I've got, I think, a couple of things that I get excited about. One is I think we're moving into a world where there's a little bit more empathy and understanding that, I suppose off the back of various movements we've seen recently, there's, I think, a wake-up call to, oh, actually, other people have lived experiences that perhaps I don't know about. Yeah. I need to educate myself. Or I've certainly seen that sort of movement there to be willing, I think, is exciting. And that's a great platform on which to grow. But I also think, in bringing it back to the reason we're sitting here today, people have been given a chance to tell their stories, and it's through storytelling that we can change the world, isn't it?
It is. Storytelling's my favourite medium ever.
Me too.
It's so beautiful, and it's emotive. You can't walk away from an amazing story, whether it's a life story or not, without feeling moved.
No, exactly. And that's where I get excited, because I guess I bring it back to what are the tools I've got? What are the tools that any of us have got to make the world easier for themselves and the people they love? And I would only say the only tools I've got is my story, it's my art, these are the things I know I've got. And now I've, got writing, and I've told a story that perhaps might land on somebody's lap. They read it, and it just, one little thought might land with them that actually, hold on, I should probably think about access in my business or in my home, and maybe that's enough. And if that'll do, that's just one little bit of impact. And I feel people like me are being given a chance to tell their story. It doesn't need to be in a book. It can be on social media. It can be on a blog. We've got tools now.
It's the great thing about social media.
It's the great thing.
We can learn when we use it correctly, and we follow people that really have something to say.
Oh, have you not learned
it's
so much?
It's powerful. Oh, so much.
Me too. And
so
I do know that, of course, I know that social media is a dangerous place.
Only if you use it badly.
There you go, I think. And if you go in and you curate your feed.
Yes.
And I follow people that blow my mind. And I come out and go, my God, I think I've just learned a whole new perspective on, I follow people from all different backgrounds and I love it. I love it. I love it so much. I actually feel that it's changed me as a person because I get to learn, and I can be curious from a place where I don't have to ask those questions that are a little bit difficult, which I do get. People are awkward. You don't want to ask questions about things you don't know about. You don't want to sound like an idiot. You can go on social media and you can learn. Yeah. And that's what we've got. And so that's, again, another space where I'm like, great, let's all use all these things to share and to learn and to grow and to then therefore hopefully impact the world around us for the better.
Yeah. Like you just said, I watched you on Loose Women talking about that awkwardness and people asking you inappropriate questions that you wouldn't just say to someone you just met, and the awkwardness of knowing when and how to bring up disability. And quite rightly say it's just common sense, like you would with any other subject in the world, common sense. But actually social media is quite a good way of bypassing a nervousness if you feel that way. And learning about, there's nothing more interesting than learning about other people's lives. Autobiographies are my favourite type of books.
I'm with you.
I want to learn as much.
Me too.
We can never know it all or get it perfectly right, but the willingness to learn and listen is so exciting. It's so exciting.
I know, I love it. And I think that's so this thing about awkwardness and about getting it wrong and hurting people's feelings, and that's real. I've just talked about the impact of that and how it can really inhibit you and it can make your life so much harder when you're feeling that people are not getting how they're harming you with the things they say. So I understand people's trepidation around disability and not wanting to say the wrong thing in case it lands badly. I understand that and I empathise, but we're at a point now where we need to educate ourselves, and there's so many tools out there to just go and learn. I invite questions in, but to your point, with common sense, if you want to ask a question, just be polite about it. Don't start asking me, can I have children on the bloody train?
No.
Which, happens. And this is where it's like, right, just apply a bit of common sense here. That's really inappropriate. And you probably shouldn't be asking people about their personal lives.
No, ever.
Just because they've got a wheelchair does not mean that's a ticket to ask anything you like. But also, if you want to know, and it's just going to help us relate and help us interact in an honest way and help us connect human to human, instead of having this big elephant in the room that makes you go, oh, I don't really know how to relate to this person, then, that you've got to go and do that. And I think, that's where things like my book, in a way, I almost feel there's this weight off my shoulders now. If somebody doesn't get it, I can go, here you go, read my book. It's such a freeing feeling of like, I don't need to explain things to it anymore. I've kind of put it down on a piece of paper. Here you go.
Yeah, just it's a manual as to how to talk to me.
Yeah.
As much as I know that a book can't eradicate pain and it can't eradicate trauma and experience, do you feel a big weight off your shoulders in a sense of there was a catharsis in, we had to confront a hell of a lot. I know you must have done it cognitively in the past, but it's very definite writing it in a book. Do you feel lighter?
Yeah, I feel like a different person.
Really?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I feel like I went on this learning curve for the last 18 years of figuring out what ableism I had in me, which was a lot.
Yeah.
I did not relate well to myself for quite a long time. I was angry, I was lashing out, I was doing stuff that I deeply, I had to do. Anyway, we're not going to go into regrets. I don't live with regrets. I can't be bothered with that at all. But there was a lot that went on. And I struggled massively. And there was all this stuff going up and down. And I didn't know where I was going. And then I think now I've got to a point where I've worked it out. I've also worked out what I know what I don't know. That kind of, I know now how to admit where I'm fearful or admit where I'm wrong or all those things. I don't know. I just growing up. It's a very extraordinary thing to say because it sounds a bit macabre, but when I had my accident, I refer a lot of people with spinal injury, or several people with spinal injury that I know, they refer to the time they had that injury as they were sort of almost born again. And so for example, if you're a year post-injury, if you ask someone how old they are, they might say I'm a year old, right? And I lived 18 years able-bodied, 18 years non-disabled. And then I've now lived 18 years disabled. And I almost feel like I've gone through the same processes. I'm 18 again. And now I've got to a place of, right, I'm about to leave the nest again. I feel like I'm about to start. I don't know what the hell's next, but it does very much feel like this marker. I've grown. I'm now a grown disabled woman. So what does that mean? I went through all the teenage, I've been through all of those phases in a different life, and now I'm coming out. And so now it's this exciting opportunity to once again go out into the world and figure my shit out, but from a very, very strong position. It just feels very like, woo, yeah, a weight is gone. Yeah.
But it feels it as well, like talking to you and reading your book. And, we've talked a lot about young Sophie and the acceptance that you've got there. Who's the Sophie with me today? Is it even possible to articulate who you believe you are today? It's a hard question to answer.
It's a hard question. I think I'd say I'm the reconciled myself. I'm very comfortable now. I think I've lost an awkwardness with myself around. I used to feel quite aware in an empathic way of other people's feeling of their intimidation of my disability or their intimidation or their uncomfortable, their awkwardness.
Which you don't need to be carried around.
I can't be bothered with that anymore. I'm literally like, please don't do that anymore, Sophie. Just don't. Get rid of that shit.
No.
And that's gone. And that's nice. And yeah, whether that's because I've written a book or whether it's literally because, like I say, I'm 18, I'm 36, I'm 18, I'm done. I know where I'm at. So I don't know, the person I'm at is very focused and probably the most motivated and happy I've ever been in my life. And probably, I don't know, it feels very like I've caught the wave of something and I'm about to go somewhere. I don't know where, but I'm so excited about it. Just saying it out loud.
So am I. I'm so excited for this book to go out into the world. As I said to you, I read it over the course of about 4 days. Chris Hellinger beat me. I think she read it in like 2 days. It's really annoyed me. I love the mutual friend Chris, but we were texting each other frantically about the bits we loved and quoting bits to each other. And we were talking about it when she came for tea yesterday.
Oh my God, that's sad.
No, it's so brilliant. And I want everybody to read it. And I'm so excited to see what you do next on the telly and also your art exhibition that I'm coming to.
Yeah, you've thrown that out now, haven't you?
Yes.
That's got to happen.
I'm very much going to be bugging you about that. But I'm so thrilled that you're in that place mentally and you feel that excitement. And what a joy it's been to talk to you. I knew it would be, but bloody hell.
Thanks. I don't even know. Honestly, so exciting. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much.
Sophie.
Thank you.